Kristi, is it weird? You just got married. Is it weird being with the last name Sullivan, or you love it?
I love it, but it's definitely weird to be like, I'm Kristi Sullivan, not Kristi Sullivan anymore.
Did with your signature, did that change? Is that weird? Did you have to practice ahead of time and all of that?
Oh yeah, I did that. That's just being a female. I feel like typically you do those things. So
Yeah.
but I haven't.
Well, there you go.
We're still in the process of getting the legal document changed over, so not there yet.
Okay. So you heard it at the filming of this interview, right after they got married, a couple weeks now. It's been good.
Oh, it's been great. Yesterday was 3 weeks officially.
Well, 3 weeks. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, congratulations again. We're going to talk today on the God is Awesome podcast about how God has been awesome in your life. That wedding was one example of God just being faithful, I know, but you have a lot of other things in your life. So on the show, we like to talk about our testimony and a couple of key ways and places where we look back and just say, man, when I look back at that, I remember how awesome God is. And so tell me, how did your journey or your relationship with God start? Tell me a little bit of the backstory for those people that don't know, and myself.
So I was raised in a Baptist household. Not that it matters, but that's the word. Raised in a Baptist household with parents who came to the Lord and just really wanted to make sure us kids knew. My dad was raised in a church. My mom was not. So it was a matter like my mom was very not convicted, but was very driven to make sure us kids were raised in great environment, knowing that we knew who the Lord was. At a young age, so we were involved very much in the church, but at a young age, I had a lot of speech issues, so I felt very out of place in a lot of areas, especially school and church, but I always felt like the oddball. So that's important, I guess, in my story, in the aspect of I think that's why my walk with the Lord became so real, because it felt like a certain point that I was always on the outskirts of not knowing people, but I was that 3 or 4-year-old who would be like, hey, I need Jesus, at the altar call every week. But I do remember the exact moment where my brother and I were hanging out at home, and in our house growing up, we had themed bathrooms. It was the rabbit bathroom, and so we had a rabbit bathroom, bathroom, and it was a 101 Dalmatian bathroom that turned into an American bathroom, American themed bathroom. So
how many bathrooms did you have? We have to pause for a second.
It was 4. So, and then there was my parents' bathroom. So it was 3.5.
You had 5 bathrooms?
4. So it was 3 full bathrooms and a half bath.
Oh, wow. Okay, go on. I had to pause you. I'm sorry for interrupting. This was too good.
So my brother, I don't know why, I have the weirdest memory, so I don't remember what I was wearing, but I know my brother was wearing a tux, and he got in my face, and he was like, Kristi, I love you so much, and I would hate for you to, go to hell and not know where you, if we were to die tomorrow. So my brother led me in salvation.
Cool.
When I was 3 or 4 years old, in the bathroom, and my mom's like, you should cut out the bathroom part of your testimony. I was like, that's my testimony.
Yeah, in the bathroom is when it. I mean, I think that says something about the God we serve. It doesn't matter which room. It doesn't matter if it's the 101 Dalmatian bathroom or the American bathroom. It's about your heart.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So really at a young age then.
Yeah, so I understood and then really grasped it, and I feel like that allowed, knowing that there was Jesus was there through everything. At I believe 9 years old, I made the decision and got baptized, which was really cool because it wasn't I went through a class, and one of my friends' moms, one of the leaders, sat with me for a few weeks, so we talked about it. So it wasn't oh, let's just get baptized, but I actually understood what I was doing. which was
Cool.
exciting and cool to see that. I think it came to a point with my testimony that, like, and then at the age in second grade, I was serving in the church. We had a praise team, and like,
Okay.
I think so. Like, I loved being at church. Like, that's where, like, so on top of it, our church was my actual elementary school. So it felt like
That's
so
good.
on top of it, like, I was always there. Like, my parents would drop me off. Like, we would have services Saturday nights and Sundays, and I was always at church, so, like, serving, hanging out. Like, I was there more than my parents were, I felt like. But my parents were also involved. Like, on Saturday nights, we would have our normal service, but then they would have high school afterwards. So my parents were high school leaders, so we would be there. Felt like all through the night, and like,
wow,
my sister and I would run through the church, and like a bunch of all the other leaders' kids. Like, we had our own little like area where we hung out. So yeah, so I just really much grew up in the church and served. And once I got in middle school, started serving in the kindergarten classroom. And so for middle school, my parents made the transition from being in an elementary school private to a public middle school, because my mom and my dad wanted us to get a taste of the real world. Which
were you still having speech issues at that time?
So no, I actually went
Okay.
through speech therapy till 5th grade, and then well, officially got out of it in 6th grade. But it was like, it'd be weird because down in Broward, they have a system where, like, the public school system does speech for free. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but I just know that down there. So my mom would take me out of school and take me down the street to the local public school for speech therapy 3 times a week. So it wasn't even at school I was taken out. Like, I was actually physically taken out of my school to go to a different school to come back. And like, they did it during my lunchtime, so I wouldn't miss a lot of school, but like, I would have to like run into lunchroom, eat real fast, and then go back to class. So definitely did not have a normal childhood. But in 3rd grade, I started the process for braces, and I look back and wonder if I actually needed speech therapy to this. I actually talked about this with a coworker, because of like the alignment of my jaw. Like, I had to wear a headgear. Now the world knows. No. I had to wear a headgear at night.
You heard it here.
That allowed, like, to hold my top jaw so that my bottom jaw could like realign. And the moment like all that happened, so it was like the end of 4th grade, beginning of 5th grade, that like my speech was normal, like getting to the point. So like, I believe in speech therapy 100%, because I wouldn't probably gotten where I was, but like with the alignment of my jaw and knowing and gone to school for it, like, I understand that I probably wouldn't have been able to make a lot of those sounds if it wasn't for that. So
sure.
So I started middle school, and in that transition, like, of being in a public school system, and I got taken out of class once, for English class, for speech therapy, like, for them to reevaluate. And I went home and I probably cried and was like, "Mom, get me out of speech. I don't need it." Like, that was like embarrassing. And she agreed, and I guess my parents talked about it, and we got the process of getting off the IEP or whatever. But man, I was so embarrassed. And I'm like, I'm in a new school. I don't know everybody, because everybody else comes with friends, and like, that was
man, it's tough. Yeah, I bet. I used to work in a middle school, so I know it's ruthless.
Oh, it's the worst. And then not having any friends. So then I was very involved in middle school, 6th and 7th grade. And 8th grade, I tell people it was like my rebel year, like, it wasn't really like, I look and hear other people's stories, and I was like, I was not a rebel. I just chose not to go to church. Like,
yeah,
what a rebel I was. Like,
yeah.
And then hung out with like maybe the wrong crowd, or like, I went through a lot my 8th grade year, to trying to fit in the aspect of like stepping away from the church and trying to fit in. I actually had these kids start to bully me in the aspect of like leaving like on Google like messages, like hurtful things, terrible phone calls, like to the point that like my parents would record, and like we had a friend at church that was a cop in the Weston area, and my parents were this close to filing a report because of the hurtful things
Wow.
that were said, and like wanting, like they were like, we're gonna kill you, blah blah blah, like we're coming after you. And all I did was had a crush on a certain boy. Like it was stupid, like, and trying to fit in. Like I didn't go to school the last day, so let's just say I was on a really like hard spot. And
Sure.
my parents ended up changing my phone number, and I never heard from the kids again. So I'm just thankful that there was that transition, and I was going to the private school with where my brother went to high school, so I wasn't going to be affiliated with these people. But fast forward a few weeks, our youth group went to summer camp, and I can't
Okay.
tell you what the sermon was. I mean, from what we did, I'm pretty sure it was like Joshua and crossing the river. But there was a sermon that hit my heart, and they asked for those who wanted to rededicate their lives to Christ. And I was like in tears the whole thing. Stood up, and like they had us walk down through, I guess, like a water, and grab a rock afterwards. And I still have the rock to this day. Like I found
Oh,
my
cool.
to remember, like I was making, like, it was no longer just a, I don't know if I would consider it was just like a religion before, but like more of a relationship. And that's, I think, where my heart changed in the aspect of really making it my own faith instead of just something I did, but making it more personal.
Sure. So let me ask a question, because there's going to be people watching that are going to have this question, and so I want to bring it up. So now you've talked about you prayed with your brother in the American bathroom
Yes.
at 3, and were baptized at 9, and then now you're at this camp. Where do you really? So do you feel like the whole time God was working and shifting and changing, or do you see this as a moment where something was different? And how do you play that out? I'm just curious what you think.
I think that it was a matter of God molding and shifting. Then, like, because I don't feel like, I mean, I feel like there was definitely things that I've learned in those years and understanding the gospel even more. I mean, I feel even today I've learned more, and it's not. I think it's just that mindset of like really like there was like a switch that like made it more like I understood it more at like 13,
Cool. Okay.
then
Yeah.
rather and like yeah. So
So then you have this rock, and it's changed. It's really had an impact with you. You still have it by your bed. That's so cool. What a cool part of the story. So what happens next? How do you react to this personal relationship with Jesus that you maybe didn't have before?
so what most people don't know about me is I was a very angry child. Um,
Huh.
very, very angry. My parents, like my sister and I had to walk through, like, I used to, like, sounds terrible to admit, but, like, I used to, like, hit my sister, and, like, when I was angry, hit the walls. Like, I'm pretty sure there's, like, holes in the wall. Like, I was very angry.
Okay.
But I, like, went for the door. Like, I would slam the door the most because I didn't want to break anything because I still had that in mind.
Yeah.
But, like, in the way that I talk to my siblings, and I feel like when that transition in high school, like 8th grade to 9th grade, that like really that I felt like went away. That I watched the Lord like really like because I let it all go. I was like, God, like every area, not just like certain areas or like
Cool.
and I feel like that was one of the biggest changes was like my brother and I like were actually able to have a decent relationship versus like beforehand.
And you think, and you believe, and you feel that that was God shaping and changing you, and honoring that prayer to just let it all go.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
It is.
So then, where do you go next?
So I transitioned into a private school with my brother, which was an interesting, like, it was his senior year, my freshman year. But after that year, our school was going through financial problems. So my parents were like, okay, Kristi, it's time for you to go back to public school. And I'm like, no. I ain't going back there.
Yeah.
So I had, during my freshman year, did school Spanish class online through this, well, Spanish 3, so it was all the way like a Washington school, but I had friends that were
Wow.
doing it through Florida virtual or Broward virtual in the area. So I actually told my parents and was like, hey, what about this? So my mom was on board, and I had to convince my dad, and I was like, Dad, it's not like you're teaching us, because my dad said he would never homeschool his kids. So
Okay.
I transitioned into high school doing 10th through 12th, did virtual school, and college, like ended up doing college classes as well.
Wow.
But with all that, still got very, like, then my parents transitioned churches, and during my high school, I got really involved in realizing that my heart was for middle school, because I felt like my hardest years, and I feel like everybody's hardest years is middle school. But knowing where
Maybe,
I
yeah.
was and everything, that I was like, all right, like, so I, we had like a Bible study once a month for the girls that I would help and get involved with, and really fell in love with serving there and learned that that's where my heart was.
Wow. Cool. So you're feeling like, those hardest years, instead of saying, man, I don't want anything to do with that. Hey, I want everything to do that. That's like this new change.
Absolutely. And I look back and I look at the leaders. Like, I love my mom and my dad, and like being raised in the church, of course, I would go to my parents and whatnot. But I had some leaders that like poured into me more so, and I think like reached me in a level that maybe my parents couldn't have, or maybe I didn't let them be in the level, like being like, I don't want you there. But
right.
Like, knowing that I had the support that I did, I feel like that's where I want to be. Like, I want to be that person to walk and be there for people who, I don't know. I think it's different. I feel like most kids that are raised in the church, or like pastors' kids, or like ministry involved kids, like they get like pushed to the wayside. Like, not every leader sees them. They're like, oh, because they're in a Christian household, they're fine. But like, no, it's not true. Like, I feel like we struggle as much as the rest, but sometimes we're able to like play it off a lot easier, because it's like, oh, like, yeah, my mom's in ministry, like, I'm good. But in reality, you're like dying inside.
Wow. So you have a special heart now, because for PKs and for kids that are have really active parents, because you realize that, maybe being raised, and I have 2 kids that I wonder about this. I'm glad you brought it up, where you raise them and you teach them all the right answers, and so they are almost off the radar.
Yeah.
For me, when I was probably the most in sin, the most like the farthest from God, I was still going to a Bible study, as an example, with my RA of my dorm in college. But I was only doing that because he would never check my room, because the one that are in the circle are sometimes, immune in your head.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, because you're saying it from the opposite perspective. Those are the kids we should be, working towards and working with. I think that's really,
well, because
really
they
interesting.
know the answers. We know the answers. We know how to manipulate. Not that I manipulate anything, but we know, like, you know what the truth is, and you know what the parents are looking for. So it's like, oh, I could say this, but like the reality of like, maybe that's not where their heart is. Like,
wow, that's super interesting. Yeah. So how do you react to this? Like, would you say it's a calling? You'd feel called towards helping this specific group of kids or looking after them?
if I would definitely say so, and I wouldn't have realized it until college that like youth was where my heart was. Like, because like being involved growing up in, like I said, serving, and like I was like, oh, children's ministry. Yeah, learned my first year, like second year in college. Children's ministry, not for me. Like, I love children, but not for me.
Yeah. Special type of person for that too.
Yes. Well, I think with that, so I guess I'll get there eventually. But I was in like an admin of children's ministry and leading at like children's ministry. That's what like I couldn't do both. I feel like if it was one or the other, I probably would have been better off. But handling both, and like I was involved in a church plant, so like there wasn't
Oh,
many
wow.
options. Like, so I did both, and I think that's what burnt me out. I think it was more of a burnt out. Maybe I am called to it eventually. I don't know, but like I think I was burned out with it. So
Gotcha. So in the story, I derailed you. I have a tendency to do that. I apologize, but you were going through virtual school and virtual college, and now you're feeling this call. And now in this part of the story, you're telling us that you're working with a church plant. How did you get involved with that?
and with the church plant.
Yeah.
Okay, so fast forward a few years to college. So I graduated and ended up going to UF, which like through high school, that's what I wanted. Little did I know, like what I wanted and what the Lord had for me were two different things. I
That
experienced
happened.
a lot
Yeah.
in that year in Gainesville, to the fact that I had a roommate that didn't like me and like made my life hell. Ended up dating a guy that we didn't have the same beliefs. In the middle of our relationship, I realized, well, it was like a month long, but I realized that it wasn't like we weren't seeing eye to eye on things. So then I had to
Sure.
like I got back from winter break and was like, all right, like literally got home, got it back to Gainesville, and broke up with him. It was terrible, but I had the most peace about it. And then to find out that the church I was going to like was like cultic like, and because I broke up with him and decided not to come to the church, all my friends decided not to be my friend. To then
Wow.
about a few weeks later, and then I got involved with another church in the area, which was my saving grace. Like this youth pastor and his family became like my like angels a few months later. Little did I know that they would come and like be what I needed. To find out, like I applied, so I was pursuing speech pathology, and at UF you have to apply for the junior and senior program, but I was a freshman applying, and
Okay.
so they only allow like 50 people in, and I was like, this is what God wants for me, blah blah blah, and was devastated when I got the email that I was not accepted into the program. So I was like, what am I supposed to do now? So walking through that to then my dad getting sick over Easter and literally being on his deathbed for like 3 weeks, like or 2 weeks not trying to like the hospital wouldn't accept him because like he has a broken back, whatever. To then being had pneumonia and they accepted him, to find out he had like this like spasm in his back, like this. I don't remember what it was, but it was something in his spine that allowed like was causing pain, and like my dad couldn't walk, and like literally like we were concerned that it was cancer, and but it wasn't, thank God. So then I left college and came home for 2 weeks to deal with that, to then come back home to my apartment or in my the dorm, and we all had like room jobs, and mine was to take out the trash, and like the trash was overflowing, and I had a sticky note on my desk that said please take out the trash, and that like took me over the edge. It was like, did you not realize like the last 2 weeks like what I've been emotionally dealing with? That I guess I posted something on Facebook venting, and the wife of this family, of the youth pastor, said pack up your stuff, you can come live with us. So I literally packed up everything out of my dorm, minus the mini fridge, which I left for them to use, and lived out, like, had everything in the back of my car, and would go up and, like, and lived at their house, but, like, most of my stuff stayed in the car, for the 2 weeks before I moved back home. So, in that transition, I found out UCF had, what do you call it? UCF had the speech program where you didn't have to apply. So, in August, I moved to Orlando. And in that time, I had friends come up and visit me, and they were like, "Oh, Kristi, we have like this pastor that used to serve at Calvary down south. Like, they just moved up here and planted a church. Like, and we want, like, let's go visit them. And I'm like, sure. Like, I knew who of them, but I didn't know them personally. Little did I know,
Sure.
like, that was going to change my world. Like, started getting involved, started going to their Bible study, and like 3 or 4 weeks, like about 3 or 4 months later, like they were about to get ready to start the church plant. Like they were just doing Bible studies on Tuesday nights, and I was attending. And like their heart for this church, and they're still there, is to reach. So they both worked in hospitality, and they wanted to give back. So they're reaching out to the Disney college students and like the hospitality
Wow.
industry in Disney, and like they're a family that loves Disney on top of it all. So and you can imagine the people that come and go, like with the students, like they change every semester, so you don't have the same people. But I got sat down, and Pastor Juan was like, "Hey, Kristi, we'd like you to take on the role of being our children's ministry, like admin." So I took that on my senior year of college. And then in the transition of it all, he had someone else hired as, like, put on as the church admin. And because of just the way life was, ended up turning it into that I was the church admin and the children's ministry. And then his wife and I talked, and she said, like, she realized that I came to a point that I was burnt out with it, mainly the children's part, because like I was pouring and like getting all the like the what do you call it? Putting all the work together for the lessons, and then trying to teach the kids week after week. So I was in there for probably 4 or 5 months without like not being rotated out. And we realized that was a big issue where I wasn't really getting poured into either. So they made a change, and then we started rotating other people in, and then I just took on the admin role, and then we off, like we rotated out for the children's. So yeah.
And so what did you think about, for those people watching that don't understand, what kind of things did you do in admin? When you say admin, maybe people
making sure, so because we were a church plant, we were involved in a hotel, so making sure we had everything was set up, having the right paperwork, like having the stickers for the kids. I would make sure, like, in charge of getting the offering from the offering box. We had events, like a brainstorm with the like planning events, outreaches, and learning like what it meant to be a leader, and not like, it was so hard because I remember us planning this one outreach that like I wanted to like I'm the leader, like I should be in control and have everything planned, and Juan was like, "No, Kristi, you need to delegate and allow other people to do what you were supposed to do." And I'm like, no, like I want to be hands on. And he's like, "That's not what a leader is. Like a leader's not necessarily always hands on." I'm like, oh. So I learned a lot about like what it meant to be a leader in that aspect of like learning to pour into the team that we were building versus carrying all the load. Like learning that it's all about delegation, and learning like even with children's ministry, I wasn't supposed to hold it all. I was supposed to like teach and show others how to handle and how to break up, like do the breakdown and everything.
Yeah, empower other people, because I really love that idea of leadership, especially Christian leadership, because we're all called into ministry, right? Every person, every Christian is called into ministry. And so, but it seems sometimes that we get this mentality that that person or those group of people, they're in charge, they're the ones doing it. But you found a different idea that actually leadership is to empower people to use their calling, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's hard though, right? It's so hard.
It's so hard because like I'm such like on the Enneagram, I'm a 2, so I'm a helper. So I want to do things, like I want to help, and it's not because like I want the credit. It's like I genuinely want to help. So like it's so hard not to.
Yeah.
And so with this, I felt like I was called to ministry. Like was looking into different programs and called my parents up. I was like, "Hey, I'm changing my degree to ministry," and my parents were like, "What? Like you're like a semester away from graduating with your bachelor's?" No. I'm like
Oh,
literally on the phone with my brother. Like I remember sitting in the parking lot, and he'll tell you he remembers this exact conversation too. We're like crying for like an hour and a half. Like I'm like, I don't understand. And that's when my brother was like, Kristi, like ministry isn't what like your job. Ministry is your calling. Ministry is your life. So like he goes, if you're called to right now to be a speech language pathologist assistant, that's your calling. That's where your ministry is. Pouring out and loving on those kids. And I was like, okay. So like it's not that ministry happens in the church. Like ministry happens in the church, definitely. But like we're called to be the hands and feet outside of the church. So that's what like
exactly.
changed my mindset of like, yes, I'm called to ministry. I'm called like that's where I feel I'm supposed to be, but I'm going to apply it everywhere else and not just at church. And so
I love that. I mean, I feel like one of the critiques from people that aren't Christians are that Christians are like this insular group. It's almost like a lodge that they get together and do this secret thing that we're not on the inside out, but then they go off and live their lives the rest of the week. But that's not who we're called. That's not what we're called to as Christians. Our ministry is not just on Sunday or our response to the gospel, but it's the entire week. It's our entire lives. We've been given new life, and to use it is what we've been raised to life for. And so I love that you just said that. Man, is that cool? So you are thinking at this point in your life, hey, speech pathology, that I can talk about, show Jesus to these kids. I can show the love of Jesus to these kids through this career, right?
yeah, and my mindset like
Cool.
shifted to the fact that like I get to love on the kids like when I graduated with my bachelor's, my cousins down south, they own a speech physical occupational therapy center, and they said when I graduated I had a job. So I moved down
Cool.
back home, which I begrudgingly did because I felt like I was going backwards. I'm like, I'm going back to where I lived in high school. Like, no, like I'm moving backwards, not forwards. Again, my brother was like, you're not going back to high school. You're moving on. I'm like, okay. Thank God for my older brother.
Yeah, he sounds like he's awesome.
Yes, he is awesome. So when I started this job, I realized that a lot of these kids, like, and yes, like they have behavior issues, they have all this, but like they're just like everyone else. But the fact that like the way that they look, most people like in the normal like out in the world would be like look at them strange and whatnot. But like getting to know them, getting to love on them, like you learn that they were like funniest. Like I had this one Down syndrome girl that like she was like my absolute favorite. Like she was so sassy and so but like the conversations and the silliness that came from it, you're like, how can you not love her? Like and
Yeah.
like that like forward to like another bond later on that I have with a different Down syndrome girl. But it was like, how can you not love these children? And I think it was that matter of that heart, if like going into like knowing that that's what I was called to do in that season.
Cool. That's awesome. And so how did you end up getting I see we're getting close to our time. How did you end up getting up to Port St. Lucie and meeting Corey, and how did all that happen? I got to hear that story.
Okay. So my senior year of high school, I came home from a trip and my parents like that I actually when I was on in Haiti, came back from a mission trip and my parents sat us down and was like, we're moving to Port St. Lucie. So my senior year of high school, we transitioned from down south to Port St. Lucie. We were in the middle of getting our the house ready. So after I graduated high school, my like right after we finished, we were transitioning up here. My parents were very wanting me to get involved in up here because they wanted me to feel established and that like I was coming home to home, and got involved with the church. And one of our friends, Dina, invited me over for a game night and was like, hey, Kristi, I have a few friends from my old church coming over, which ended up being Aaron, Corey, and a few others. And that's where I actually met Corey. Corey and I would talk as friends, like from that point on, and like we ended up running into each other at Passion that following year. But I guess Corey found this out years later. But like I got very Corey and I had like the best conversations, but I was like, this is too real, and like he's an older guy, like I'm not going, like he's never going to be interested in me. So got scared and I cut him off and like stopped responding and whatnot. So fast forward a few years where in my transition to Orlando, I got rid of social media in the aspect of like wanting to protect myself from looking back at what my friends were doing down south and at home and seeing where they were with their lives. I cut the comparison game and got off social media. And that's with everyone. So
real quick,
go ahead.
Real quick, what do you mean by cut the comparison game? I love that phrase, but explain it with people that might not understand what did you mean by that?
I was to a point where like I was comparing myself to others in the way that where they were in life and like who they were hanging out with and like why was I not close with them, and I like becoming very unhappy about where the Lord had me in the season, and I got off social media so that I could be present. And eventually, like the reason I'm back on social media became ministry purposes, and like I was only and that's why I still am on social media is for ministry, but
like right now.
Yeah. But that's with the comparison, I just needed to protect myself, protect my heart from growing bitterness towards people that it wasn't their fault. Like they were just living their life, but
so
yeah. So then fast forward a few years where I got back on social media and was like, oh, scrolling. I think last year I was scrolling through Instagram and came across Corey's account, and I was like, oh, like I remember this dude. Like I'm gonna follow him. And when I followed him at the time, he had over 1,000 followers and 1,000 like following. So I was like, he's public. He's not gonna know who I am. Like I'm just gonna follow him. And like immediately he requested to follow back, and then as he says, he like slid into my DMs. But like he was like, hey friend, it's been a while. So he friend zoned himself from the beginning. But I don't think he had like the heart or intention of that. So we started talking, and we're like, oh, we're old friends. We should hang out and plan a movie night. We were talking about Disney movies, like the original Disney movies, like Johnny Capahala and all these other like old school. And so we made plans to hang out, and little did I know, or little did we even know, I think we realized halfway through the day that it was actually our first date. Like it ended up being like the longest date of life, like of history. Probably like 12 or 13 hours. But because I drove from down south, I was like, oh, like making the most of our day. And then I went back to like my parents. And I went back to my parents' house that was here in Port St. Lucie. So then we continued talking, and I continued coming up, and we had the conversation in the aspect of like, if we're serious. Well, I told Corey on our first date, please don't mess with me. Like, don't mess with my heart. Like, if you're not in this, like, I don't want any part of it. And I think that put a reality check on where we were headed with the relationship. And about a month later, we decided that like we were serious enough. So I started looking for jobs in May, like to move up here. So that was the process. And then in August, eventually moved up. And then in November, he proposed. And then in April, we got married.
That's awesome. He proposed on a mountaintop too, which is like, come on, guys, take notes.
Right?
That's good. That's beautiful. Awesome. The pictures are stunning. So now you've been really involved here. Again, you've been involved with middle school and with high school and with specifically kids whose parents are highly involved in ministry. So that's kind of stayed with you, right?
Yes.
That's really, really cool that God has kept his promise this whole time, and that calling he's used in a powerful way. I mean, the girls love you. Everybody like loves you. It's like so awesome in our youth group, especially. So keep that up. Anything else? We're past our 30-minute mark here. Not that it matters that much, but still, tell me in your own words why you think God is awesome. In the midst of this whole thing, this whole journey, what why would you sum up why God is awesome?
To have someone love you like the Lord love us the way that He does, and so faithful, like to pursue and to bring us back to the cross, even when we do go our own ways. Like, how awesome is that to have a God that like cares about us that much, that He continues to pursue and continues to show us how His faithfulness through it all.
Wow, so good. The God of faithfulness is awesome, and He is with you the whole time, from the 3-year-old American bathroom, which I will never forget, all the way through a marriage and ministry and a move and this new phase in your life. Kristi, thank you so much for sharing all the ways that God has just blessed you and worked through your life. It's so evident. I just want to encourage you in your ministry because knowing you in the way that I do, you're just really called. And I'm so thankful to know you and to be alongside you in ministry. So keep it up. For everybody else out there, thank you so much for watching. And just want to remind you that God is faithful, like Kristi said. T-shirt moment, we made it. And God is faithful and God is awesome. And until next time, remember that. All right, we'll talk to you soon. And goodbye.